Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, interviews experts like doctors, counselors, and life artists who give helpful tips on living a happier life. But most importantly, Bob interviews ordinary people who have suffered with a mental health issue. Each one has recovered to lead a much happier life. You can do it too. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
There are unprecedented statistics on depression and anxiety, suicide, and drug overdoses among our young children. Parents need real ideas on how to stay in touch and connected to their children. Having facilitated the healing of multiple families from major life conflicts and issues, Sue Horton has put together the book, Raising a Resilient Family: How to Create Strong Connection and Communication in a Deeply Distracted World. Her greatest hope is to support parents in finding better ways to coexist with their children successfully and to help families develop resilience to thrive in extraordinary ways.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello, Susan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bob. Thanks so much for having me.
Could you tell the listener a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am the former director of a therapeutic boarding school for troubled teens. I've worked with hundreds of families in crisis, as well as families that, outside of that setting through my private practice. So my work is really, primarily about, connecting families, helping families to communicate and figure out, what's going on that's creating the struggle, the disconnect.
So, when you were growing up, what kind of family did you have?
Yeah, I come from, we have four siblings, and my parents, were working class. I'm number 3. I have an older brother and sister and then a younger sister. And my parents, ended up getting a divorce, just as I was getting into adolescence. And it was ugly. My dad, abruptly left my mother and went on to marry her close friend shortly thereafter.
Oh no, that had to have some kind of effect on you, I would think.
Yeah, it was a double betrayal. And, my mother, who, I perceived as this independent, incredibly intelligent, woman, suddenly, became depressed, suicidal. She tried to kill herself several times.
Oh, really? Oh my God. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, it was very hard. And, I became what they call parentified, so I was the oldest living at home at the time, and my 2 older siblings were off, one was in college and one had gone off to, live an independent life. So there I was with my younger sister who was 14, so she needed support. And my mom just couldn't function. She really had what I guess we'd call today a nervous breakdown. And she ended up leaving. She ended up abandoning us, within a short period of time.
Oh my God. That is a terrible way to grow up. I'm sorry.
Well, it ended up, being I think it lends, specifically to what I do today. I think when we figure out how to survive and thrive despite, these very harsh, difficult experiences, traumas really, that's what, like you're doing, you want to then teach how you did that successfully and how you survived and what were some of the strategies you used to get through that. That's been, part of why I became who I am today. So.
I grew up with 2 parents that were very dysfunctional. My father had undiagnosed depression and my mother had tremendous anxiety. So I got a lot of it, almost all of it. And then I have ADHD, which makes it that much worse. And I had dyslexia. So I was in I talk about going nervous breakdown. I had 2 of them and they're not very nice. I mean, I wound up in the hospital, but I've been good, really good. And I've turned my life around and I'm recovering and I'm having happy moments, but I'm still looking for more. I'm not satisfied. I think I can go further with my recovery. What is the name of your book?
It's called Raising a Resilient Family.
Okay.
And it's, the how to create strong connection and communication in a deeply distracted world.
Okay. And I read that it caters to teenagers. We had a girl on the show called Amy, and she would cut herself, and her whole body was cut up. There's so much self-harm, so much suicide, so much mental disorders where people don't know what to do. So what does your book go into as far as helping parents and other people try to reach these teenagers?
Yeah, I have a big belief that finding passions and purpose in your life help you heal and move forward from disappointments and distractions and traumas. So I really invite parents and kids to really look at what it is they're inherently good at. What are their tendencies and talents? What do they do while they're doing it that they don't experience the passage of time, for example? And you'll find that if you ask that question, most teens have something they can point towards. And I'm not talking about video games, by the way, or, any sort of substance use or social media. I'm talking about things that, while you're doing them, you're completely engaged intellectually and you're challenged in some way to improve somehow in that effort. And it
Right.
engages you in a way like nothing else. And again, you don't notice the passage of time because you're so involved with it. And it can take the form of a creative endeavor, art, music, writing, dance. There's just been so much research on creative behaviors and activities actually help us move out of an anxious moment more than any other kind of activity and endeavor. So I always encourage kids, when they're having a moment of panic, if they paint, if they play an instrument, if they sing, dance, whatever it might be, if they write, they journal to help them. Those, by moving into an activity like that in a moment of, an anxious moment, it will move the mind into another part of the brain and it'll calm you almost instantaneously. There's all kinds of breathing techniques that in DBT and those kinds of strategies that also work, being in the moment, being mindful of what you're feeling and, you're getting your senses lined up with the present moment also helps, with an anxiety, experience. However, I have worked with so many teenagers in, a residential setting where we would, try different things like creative, experiences, and physical ones too, like hiking and wilderness type, strategies and challenges that, there's something about engaging the mind differently in the moment that will shift you out of that, that place of high anxiety. And
the road to sometimes get to a point where you're interested in anything, because a lot of people are so depressed that they're not getting a dopamine reward that they would normally get. For instance, I was like that, and I would sleep the whole weekend. And I finally found, like this podcast, I found computers, I found things that I liked because dopamine was getting into my brain. So sometimes, I don't say all the time, but sometimes I advocate prescription drugs. But, it's not for everybody. I just say that. But sometimes you got to get them to a point where they have enough reward to actually get into something.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, there is a place where that's needed, just to get you up to a place where you even notice what you're good at, where you're even aware of what you're good at, because you can get very deep into depression and lose sight of that. You're right. There is sometimes a need for medication. But you'll see that, and I'm sure you're seeing this, to some degree. I don't know, but when you do tap into what it is you love, what it is you're naturally, it's a natural high, if you will. It's a natural way to access that dopamine, and you'll know it, you'll feel it, and it's obviously the best way to be and the best point to get to. And then, repeating it and finding different ways to access it. There's also multiple ways, I'm sure, for you that, maybe you have some creative endeavors you do in addition to the podcast that also tap into. So I also think it's important to, exercise and get out in nature. There's other elements to it. There's other ways to balance, some of the access to that feeling.
Yeah, I always preach exercise and eat right. And unfortunately, I don't stick to it. But now I'm determined to stick to a good diet and get some exercise. One thing I wanted to get into was social media and how that affects teenagers. I think especially young girls or women.
Yeah.
What's your view on that? How can a parent stop it? How can a parent monitor what they're actually getting over the social media?
Yeah, and again, I want to emphasize and point toward an activity that taps into that child's passion. Their deeper sense of purpose and meaning. Where can a parent find that? They have to, first and foremost, ask your child what they love to do and listen. That sounds so simple, but many parents miss that mark completely because they have they have an agenda of their own, or they have expectations maybe they had as children to, do things that, create a well-rounded being, for instance, rather than, a child that maybe is passionate about horseback riding, for example. Not allowing that child to pursue that passion is deadly almost to their, their core inner self, their core sense of self. So that's I can't say that enough. With my own children, I have 4 children of my own. They're now adults, such different children, and they had different passions, and they're pursuing those passions today. But there were times, especially with my son, who's my youngest, where we didn't want him to become a musician. We didn't want him to, love heavy metal music, for instance. We wanted him to be maybe an athlete or maybe go into business, study business. And it was completely, different from who he was and what he was interested in doing and being. And when we embraced it, which was later, when he was probably a young adult, 18, 19, 20, we finally, would start to go to the concerts and the performances and see how happy and alive he felt on stage.
I can relate to that. I love music. Music to me is, it's funny. I sit down every day and listen to, Spotify for at least a half hour, and I actually wind up singing, and my voice is terrible, but it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
To listen to music and sing.
Therapeutic, but it's absolutely the best thing, especially if it taps into, again, that joy. And, I always ask kids to go back to, when they were 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. That, I think I call that the magical age, because you are if you're in a, barring any, any abusive or traumatic situation that you might be in, if you're in just a regular kind of safe environment, that age is where you really do express your most authentic self. So in that time period that you can really pull out those joy-filled activities and connections that will lead you to your purpose and passion and meaning in life. And the other really important piece is you can't just do it for yourself. There has to be a connection with others. So whatever it is that you're passionate about and you're interested in doing and being, you have to extend it, and serve with it somehow, like you're doing. You're actually serving others. That's where the real
I have a real problem with speaking, because when I grew up, I was the youngest, and my brother was a certified genius, and my other one was a Mr. America athlete. Everybody respected him. And I just kind of tagged along and said nothing. I would say nothing in school. I'd go home and watch TV and say nothing. And then when I did try to say something, they would immediately step over it because they're very loud family. So it created, even to this day, when I prepare for the podcast, I get really nervous. And then usually when I get on the actual recording, I'm fine. I'm good. But it's difficult to get over that PTSD. It does haunt you. And I always preach about demons and how they talk to you and tell you you're no good. But you gotta stop listening to them. I think that's very important for teenagers. I saw something in Facebook that was just saying, the world is horrible. There's all sorts of crime. Everything is terrible. And these were parents. I mean, these were adults. And I could imagine a kid that's, on the edge reading something like that and saying, oh, they're right. This world is terrible. I have to get out of it. But I think they're wrong. I think there is as much good as there is bad. And I think it's just the fact that we emphasize on the newscast everywhere, we emphasize the bad and don't say what was good that day. Like, my sister let me live there for a while when I was having a depression. That wasn't in the news, So. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I have learned about social media, and I'm sure the listeners have learned this too, because it's, there's a documentary called, I believe it's called The Social Dilemma. I think you can find it on Netflix or maybe one of the streaming services, but it's worth watching. And one of the key pieces that it brings out or talks about is that once kids get into a subject, they Google a subject. So for instance, if you were Googling self-harm, to look at different ways to self-harm, you would suddenly find your newsfeed and your Facebook and your different social media outlets that you're tapped into. They're all going to start feeding that. They're all going to, your algorithm, in other words, is, all of a sudden they're going to pull you right down a rabbit hole and give you all kinds of ways and means to connect with that concept. And if it's a negative concept to begin with, you're going to be trapped and brought into and seduced by, the negativity. It's almost like life itself, like you were saying, if you think, and the opposite is true. If you're looking for, positive things and for instance, you have an interest in music and you want to pursue it in some way, shape or form, you can also do that, start Googling and start showing interest in posts and things that are connected to your passion, and you will be fed more and more of that. As you and I know, when looking at, inspirational speakers and podcasts and TED Talks, if you will, all of a sudden they're showing up every day on your Instagram and your media. I want to encourage, any of the teenagers listening, start Googling those things if you're going to be on social media, find out how to be better at who you are authentically by doing things.
Yeah. When for like 60 years, I didn't really understand that I had an issue, which was ADHD. I just thought I was stupid. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are what they call neurodivergent. And they're just thinking, oh, I'm a loser. Oh, I'm stupid. Because we don't think the same way as a neurotypical person. So I think it's important that schools and other cultural areas recognize these people for what they are. And, there's so many of them with so many good ideas that we can tap into. And I just think we need to make people aware of the problem, aware of the mental health pandemic, and have more discussions on it.
And yeah, there needs to be, and I worked at an alternative school, obviously. So we had the creativity and capacity and time, quite frankly, to be creative around those things and to, create adaptive ways of learning and experiencing growth, in a school. And it does require, you have to allow these kids to be physical, to move. For example, they can't sit in a classroom for 4.5 hours, 5 hours, whatever it might be. So that's a key piece. And then the creative piece. I mean, a lot of neurodivergent kids, as you are, you need to be fed creatively. You need to have outlets for that way of thinking, right? And figuring out your particular way of thinking and what benefits it has. There are so many benefits to being ADHD, by the way. We speak so much about what's wrong with it and how it interferes and interrupts life. But in fact, you'll be able to do so much more if you tap into how you can use that strength, because it is a strength.
If you could say, well, yes, I make a lot of mistakes, but that's okay. You learn by your mistakes. And I've learned a lot by having this type of a brain. It was frustrating when I worked in IT. I would know the answer, but I couldn't explain it to anybody. I just knew it. And then 6 months later, they would come up to me and say, Bob, you're absolutely right what you said before. We just didn't understand. And that's what's happening to kids, especially teenagers. No one understands them. Their family will, in a lot of cases, not even think that there's anything like ADHD or any kind of neurodivergent. They want their kids to be perfect, and they don't want to hear the fact that maybe this kid has a problem, and then they have nowhere to go. They're trapped. That's when they get into violence.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that the educational systems are becoming more aware. I think there's a heightened, from the time certainly when we were growing up. I'm 60. I don't know how old you are.
I'm 65. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were growing up, you were just, forced to be in a classroom. There weren't any options, right? But today there are. I think they're really, like the vocational schools, for example, are, doing amazingly creative things around kids that maybe need to use their hands, for example, to learn. And Montessori type, schools are amazing, at leading kids into their individuality, their strengths, their particular ways of learning, right? The unique ways of learning. And I do think, the public school is, goodness gracious, it's really falling apart on many levels because it has to respond. It has to respond because look at what happened. In the pandemic, we lost growth in these emotional growth in these kids that were isolating, and unable to learn in that way. I mean, most kids can't learn on a computer,
Right.
And anyway, in any case, the point I'm trying to make is that when you have the time to be creative and you can look at different ways of learning through experience, creating different kinds of programs, which we were able to do where I work. It's amazing, the growth. It's amazing the connection these kids
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah, I just want it to become mainstream where everybody's on board, because I have adult children that are neurotypical, and we have a very hard time getting along because they don't really believe, they think it's an excuse I'm making. Oh, Dad, why didn't you understand that? Why weren't you paying attention to me? And inside the family, there's even siblings of people with ADHD are committing suicide. So I just want it to be where everybody's on board and everybody understands what these children need. And even people without the ADHD, they need to understand that they're not crazy. They're normal people, and they can recover and they can get better. And that's why I emphasize on this show. Everyone can recover if they want to. That's what I try to emphasize.
I believe that as well. I believe that as well. And I love what you're doing. And I love that, you're using your own life, your own experience to teach. That's, I'm of a similar, background and just different, I come with different flaws, but, the other piece too is even those who are in the mainstream and what did you call them? Neurotypical. They're also struggling, with different kinds of distractions and distortions on connecting to, who they are authentically. And the media does project this illusion around, these are what perfect people look like, like the Kardashians. It's such an external representation of a human being that isn't real. And, we're never going to meet that mark as normal people. It's not even how they live isn't normal at all. It's so extreme. So it's, it's cultivating this connection with who you are, what you're good at authentically. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be amazing. You can just be you in your uniquely, amazing way. We all have.
Beautiful person.
Yeah.
Everyone is a beautiful individual. Everyone has come here under unbelievable odds. If you think about since the beginning of time, all these things had to happen right for you to be here. That's how important that's how important every single person is. So I try to emphasize that.
And every single person, has meaning and purpose.
Exactly.
That's unique, that they're uniquely qualified to pursue in this life. And it's just figuring that out and staying internal around who you are. Not betraying yourself, in other words, to be someone you're not.
Exactly.
To represent yourself as someone you're not. And I think when you talk about acceptance, that's what I'm after. I'm after these kids accepting who they are with their flaws and all, and being comfortable enough to just be who they are in the world.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And not buy into the expectations and the illusions because they're not true. They're all lies, really.
Yeah, they are lies. And coming up, I have a solo show about lies in this society. And I think it's going to be really good. Your book is called, again?
Raising a Resilient Family. And
you can get that.
I have a website.
Go ahead, say your website. Go ahead.
RaisingAResilientFamily.com. You can also obviously get it through Amazon and Audible. And it's, a very practical, very short read. And it really was set up for people that are busy and just want, each chapter has a great idea on how to connect and communicate and, become more self-aware so that you can connect to honestly yourself, the best version of you. And that's when you become, a better parent, a better person, a better contributor to life.
And it's at Barnes & Noble and other bookstores?
No, it's not. I don't have it at other books. It is on, it's in some independent bookstores, but the really the most efficient way to get it is through either the website or Amazon directly.
Okay, sounds great. I encourage people to go and take a look at it. It's been really great having you on this show. I really love to talk about this subject, and you were terrific, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for doing the work you do. I know you're making a difference in so many people's lives, and I know you're probably saving some lives and giving people hope. And that's a really important piece of what you do.
That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day and take care.
Take care too.